The crankcase is clean and the left-hand side is mounted to the engine stand. And I'm pretty confident that without the crank installed, when I enclose the two halves of the case, it's not going to leak. Now the next step is to install the heart of the engine, the crankshaft. Now I thought this was going to be as simple as just cleaning it up and dropping it back in. No. Turns out actually, it's a lot more complicated than that. You've got to remember that this is the first time that I've ever rebuilt an engine. I'm learning as I go. What you're about to watch was a 2.5-month pursuit. Let's get into it. When we tore down the engine, we pulled the crankshaft out with the connecting rod still attached, basically as one big crankshaft connecting rod assembly. The crankshaft is the big shaft I'm holding, and those little rods swinging off it are the connecting rods, or con rods if you want to sound cool. Trouble's engine is a 4-cylinder, so it's got 4 con rods. Now, just to make things easier to follow, here's a bit of background. Each con rod has 2 ends, one big, one little. The big end, shockingly, is the larger side that attaches to the crankshaft, and the little end is the smaller side that connects to the piston. And if that wasn't obvious enough, the connecting rod gets its name because it literally connects the pistons to the crankshaft. Mind blown. Anyway, before we could reinstall any of this, we needed to thoroughly clean it. First job, stripping the con rods off the crank. To get them off, we had to undo the 2 big end cap nuts, separate the big end cap from the con rod studs, and then slide the con rod off.
It's a bit less now. I want to find out where it's at. So go down to 40. That wasn't very tight at all. It was less than that.
Jesus.
There's a little gap there for you for a tiny screwdriver. They really weren't very tight at all, were they?
A hammer in case we have to resort to that. I've returned. What's happened?
Well, what I did was, I dig a little gap and then I just put my wedge in there. I've got both sides equal.
And it fell off. So what do you think?
I think it looked fine. Journals are great.
Right, we're going to go for this one.
Can you wind that torque wrench down?
We're winding it down.
I don't understand why they're so loose.
So we now are at 30 pounds-feet, 4 Newton meters. My dad wanted to check how much torque the big end nuts had been tightened to. So we incrementally increased the torque wrench to see at what point they'd break loose. There we go, it's more than 4 Newton meters. Sick. It's more than... What are we at now? Must be back at 50 pounds-feet.
37.
We've just taken our con rods off our crank. We did video it. Well, I thought I videoed it. Didn't video it. All of the big end bearings are quite good.
None of it.
Well, I don't know. I have to have a look, but the camera was off. All the big end bearings look pretty good, so we're probably going to just clean this up, re-grease it with some new, re-lube it with some new engine oil, make sure it's all clean. Obviously this isn't the most ideal work surface, but we're going to be cleaning it anyway. So we're going to clean it up and then re-lubricate it with some brand new engine oil and then reassemble the con rods onto the crank. Maybe we will buy some new bearings, maybe.
Why? Are they
What is
worn?
that? Why is it red?
It's the base metal.
Oh, so it's worn through.
Yeah, essentially.
How does the crankshaft work? An engine's main purpose is to generate rotational movement. The crankshaft is the key component that makes this happen. Inside the engine, the pistons move up and down in a straight line, powered by combustion. The crankshaft, it takes this linear motion and converts it into rotational motion, which ultimately drives the wheels on the car. This is possible thanks to the crankshaft's offset cranks, or journals as some people call them. As the pistons move up and down, They push and pull on the connecting rods, which are attached to these offset sections. This creates a continuous spinning motion, keeping the engine running smoothly. Trouble's engine redlines at 5,500 RPM. In simple terms, that means the crankshaft can safely spin up to 5,500 times per minute without turning into a grenade. That's 92 revolutions per second. To handle that kind of speed, the engine relies on 3 key bearings to keep everything turning smoothly. The main crank bearings, also known as main bearings, the big end bearings, and the little end bearings. These bearings wear out over time, and unless an engine suffers some major catastrophe, they're usually the reason you end up rebuilding it. So, how do I know if these bearings need replacing? Luckily, there are some common symptoms of worn bearings, including knocking or rattling noises, low oil pressure, and excessive engine vibrations. But the only problem was that these rely on the engine to run. Trouble's engine was in pieces. It wasn't running anywhere. This meant we had to rely on inspection and measurement methods instead. The key with bearing wear is the clearance between the crankshaft and its bearing. If this clearance is too big, the crank won't be properly supported and the engine will lose oil pressure, hence a rattly low oil pressure engine. We measured the crank journals and inspected them for scoring. The crank measured within the factory tolerance and looked good without any scoring. If the crank journals had score marks, I would have had to get them reground, and this starts getting really expensive. Since the crank was in spec, the next step was measuring the internal diameter of the main bearings to make sure the clearance was still good. Trouble's engine has 4 plain main bearings. 3 of them are 1-part cylindrical bearings, not shells, and 1 is a 2-part shell bearing. In theory, measuring them should have been easy, but there were 2 problems. One of the 1-piece bearings was stuck behind 2 gears that were pressed into the crank with an interference fit. That means that the only way to measure it properly was to remove these gears, a job that, according to social media, required specialist tools which I didn't have. The other problem was one of the bearings was a shell bearing, pretty awkward and inaccurate to measure with a vernier caliper. The 2 1-part bearings that we could measure, we did measure, and they were in tolerance. To measure the clearance between the 2-part shell bearing, we reassembled the crankcase with the clean crank installed, but with plastic gauge between the crank and the main bearing shell. We then torqued the case up and then stripped it down again to see how much the plastic gauge had squidged. The result was good news. The 3 bearings that we could measure, they were all within tolerance and showed no signs of scoring. Although the shell bearing did have some odd grinding marks on its jointing faces, but without another one to compare it to, me and my dad just assumed it was fine. At this point, we made an educated guess. If 3 of the 4 main bearings were good, the 4th was probably fine too. So the final decision? The main bearings and little end bearings were good to go, but I was going to replace the big end bearings just to be safe. The next day I went to Volkswagen. I met Mark. Mark's an engine builder for Nicholson McLaren. They build some pretty special engines. He was keen to help me and give advice. The next week he came around to see what I was up to and taught me a lot. To summarise, that ground centre main bearing, yep, that one, it needed to go straight in the bin. No questions. This meant the new main bearings weren't optional anymore. They were a must. He also told me that a good engine is a smooth engine, and a smooth engine was a balanced engine. Mark strongly suggested I got the rotating assembly, which consists of the crankshaft, flywheel, clutch pressure plate and front pulley all balanced as a minimum. He also suggested making sure that the conrods and pistons were also balanced. He did have a point. After all, we didn't know why they'd stopped using Trouble. Maybe the engine was seriously out of balance. Maybe that's why the linings on my barrels were worn. But then surely there would have been signs on the bearings. Either way, one thing was clear. Just cleaning and reinstalling the crankshaft was no longer on the cards. My new to-do list? Order everything I needed to get the rotating assembly balanced, and then get the balancing done. I ordered new main bearings, new big end bearings, a new piston and barrel kit, and a new clutch pressure plate. Time to do this properly. This order was painful, but necessary. The bearings were toast, my pistons had worn through the liners on my barrels, although secretly I actually wasn't too disappointed about this, as it was a good excuse to buy a big bore kit. And then there was the diaphragm spring on my clutch pressure plate. It had a concerning groove worn into it. To make this order more painful, It turns out that Porsche have an exclusivity contract with Sachs, the only manufacturer of a Type 200 Super 90 pressure plate, and as a result, they charge what they like for these clutches. A new pressure plate, on its own, no friction plate or thrust bearing, it's not a clutch kit, it cost me nearly £500. A joke. Disgusted, I went and drowned my sorrows at the pub with a mate and told him all about it. He suggested I spoke with a company called Orca who reline his clutches and brake shoes. It was a worthwhile conversation. Less than a week later, I had a fully refurbished clutch pressure plate with a brand new diaphragm spring and a reline friction plate for less than £100. Safe to say, I took great pride in sending Porsche's clutch right back where it came from. Now that I had everything I needed to get the rotating assembly balanced, all that was left was prepping it for the job. I thought, rightly or wrongly, but turns out wrongly, that the balancing shop would need the new main bearings installed on the crank. So my dad and I tackled what was supposedly an impossible task, removing the camshaft and distributor drive gears from the crankshaft. I'm out in the garage today with my dad in an attempt, pretty heavy, an attempt to change the main bearings on my crankshaft so that I can send it off to be balanced. In theory, this shouldn't be too hard a job, as most of the crankshaft's main bearings are, this one just slides on, another one is a cup, but the real challenge is getting this main bearing off. So as you can see, it's trapped between this web on my crankshaft and then this kind of assembly of gears. This gear drives the camshaft, and then this worm gear drives my tachometer and the distributor. And these are all interference fits on this. So these were put on when the crankshaft was smaller than the inside diameter of these gears. So they're all really wedged. So how I'm going to get these off, I hope, is to heat them up and then pull them off. We're going to see if it works. Hopefully it works. If not, might have to get someone else to do this for me. But in theory, heating these up should increase their diameter, and then I'll be able to pull them off. Let's wait and find out. Oh, and by the way, you spot anyone in the background? Trouble's looking a little bit different. Armed with screwdrivers, a hot air gun, and a puller, we got to work. Step 1. The C-clip battle. Now, you'd think a C-clip designed to be removed would have little eye holes for circlip pliers, right? No, nothing. Meaning this quickly became a four-hand job. It was a full-on battle, a race to get screwdrivers between it and the groove it sat in. After some time, me and my dad finally got it out the groove and off. Whee! Now that that circlip, or hench circlip, is off, what we're going to do is heat up this cluster of things that is an interference fit on the crankshaft to hopefully make them expand, and then with a puller we will then try and pull them off. Step 2, pulling the gears. With the circlip out the way, we heated the gears and pulled them off, and honestly, that part was easy. I don't know what kind of special tools you need other than a puller and a hot air gun. Way easier than dealing with that stupid clip.
Yeah, fine. All right, hurry up.
Once the gears were off, I threw them in my mum's oven at 150 degrees C, just to make sure they were properly heated for reassembly. I then put the new main bearing on, lubricated with a generous amount of assembly lube, and then raced to get the heated gears back on and then lock them on forever with that stupid little clip. Let's go get the camshaft gear and my distributor and tachometer gear out of the oven.
I think you should just get one.
Which one should I get? Tachometer?
The one that goes on first. Yeah, so you've got to line up the keyboard. Run a bit.
Oh shit, it just fell on.
Is that it?
Well, not the whole way, but...
I think it's there, isn't it? It just fell on.
Did you see that?
Yeah. Oh, it's there, it's all the way there.
Get back!
You can hear that's down. You've got them both bits.
No, they're my cooking gloves!
That's on. It's on.
Yeah. That's it.
In.
It's not in yet, but it's going in, isn't it?
With everything back assembled, I then rang the balancing company to get it booked in. The good news, they could fit me in quickly. The bad news, they didn't want any bearings on the crank, but did need the camshaft and distributed drive gears secure on the crank. This meant we had to fight the circlip again, heat and pull the gears off again, slide the bearing off, and then put the gears and circlip back on, all while well aware we were going to have to do this all over again to put the bearing back on. At this point, I really started to see the argument for using 2-part shell bearings. The only positive, me and my dad are now pretty good at getting these crank gears off.